Rashida Tlaib upheld her side of the bargain, though. She was holding up a sign that said war criminal during Benjamin Netanyahu's remarks yesterday throughout that. And meanwhile, you had all of these violent lefties in front of Union Station who were defiling the nation's capital, tearing down American flags, setting them afire, raising instead foreign flags. They were raising Palestinian flags up on the very same poles they just ripped and burned American flags on. And, they painted pro-Hamas messaging. It wasn't coded or subtle or anything like that. It was just Hamas is coming, it said. It was all written in spray paint on the side of these great monuments. Not every building in Washington, D.C. is good looking. Not every building is. In fact, a lot of the new construction you see all over the city is horrid, and that's unfortunate. But we do have some great buildings in Washington, D.C., and right there near the tippy top of the list is Union Station. It is a gorgeous building, and it's a nice feature that so many people for years have come into Washington, D.C. and left Washington, D.C. through because you catch a train there at Union Station. But the left has worked overtime to destroy that which we find beautiful. If there is order, they need to deliver chaos. That's the goal. And it's a Marxist goal. Because if you inject all of this chaos, it leaves people turning, going, where do we turn for any support? Oh, turn to us. We will concentrate power in the government. We will be the solution to the very problems that we're creating for you. So more Marxist chaos going on. Also, do these people even know what they're talking about? I don't think they do. I mean, I guess it's the feature of this Marxism. But when you put a hammer and sickle on the side of the Liberty Bell replica that we have in front of Union Station, you put a hammer and sickle on it, and you say you're supporting Muslims, right? Are you following this? The hammer. Tell that to the people of Afghanistan. What are they even talking about? The Soviet Union is a great symbol of Muslim liberty or Arab liberty. It's nonsense. All of it is Marxism. It doesn't matter that it's incoherent. Incoherence is the point. Incoherence is the point. And here you have, the left just absolutely causing chaos. Kamala Harris has come out some 24 hours later to offer words of condemnation towards the people who were out in front of Union Station yesterday, which is just great. The best part of the Kamala Harris reaction here is she's damned if she does, she's damned if she doesn't, and she deserves every bit of this. So she doesn't say a word about it. Well, yeah, because she's sympathetic to these people. These are her voters, and she doesn't want to upset them by criticizing them. But she does criticize them 24 hours later. Good. Fight amongst yourselves. Have your little civil war. Drive your people crazy. And hopefully it short circuits your ability to steal this whole thing. Kamala Harris, who was not elected to this role. There was no primary process to put her here. It's so transparently authoritarian that even the Black Lives Matter people are noticing. The BLM Twitter account is going crazy about this. Today, expressing the following, quote, Kamala was selected, not elected. But the solution is simple. Join us in calling on the Democrats to let the American people vote in an informal virtual primary, an online vote, as soon as possible, so our communities can weigh in on this unprecedented moment. Democracy demands no less. Well, that is the kind of election that the Democrats would like to have. An online vote, yeah, that's about as unsecure as it gets. So they'd be all for it. Oh, we can rig this thing for Kamala in no time. But they're not even going to do that. No, you don't want to risk it. You don't want to risk it that much. They're not going to put this before the voters. Let the voters decide? Never. Never. In fact, they have such low regard for the voters, they refuse to choose anybody but a white man to join Kamala's ticket. At all. Have you seen the short list here? I know Gretchen Whitmer's name pops up. She's like rank 7 on the list. That's a red herring. And she's awful. She is completely awful. But they refuse to choose anybody but a white dude for the role. Everybody who's on the list. And the white dudes who are on the list, the trouble that they're having is that their base is so anti-Semitic that they can't choose the Jewish white dudes. There's hand-wringing right now about whether or not Josh Shapiro would be a good fit because their base may not go for him. He's too Jewish, is the thinking. That's crazy. That's crazy. It's a sign of how radical your party is. And now they're saying we can't shoot. They have such contempt for the average American voter. Their view is, well, you're all racist, so there's no way we can run this ticket without a white dude on it. So we've got to pick a white dude. This is their thinking. This is their thinking. So that forecloses on other possible Democrats that they could put on the ticket. The Wes Moores of the world. Or the Raphael Warnocks. Anybody else. Nope, only white dudes. The public's too racist to handle it. Boy. That's their view. So, of course, they're not going to open this up for votes. Kamala Harris has no popularity among the base, among voters, and rightfully so. And the media is working pretty aggressively as we speak to reinvent Kamala Harris. And it is funny to watch. You look at the transformation that they're trying to manufacture right now. Just imagine being the campaign staffer who's been assigned with programming Kamala Harris's personality. Like, right? They put a bunch of kids in a room and they say, come up with a personality for Kamala Harris, please. Somebody come up with a personality. Anybody have any ideas? Anybody? And they're like, well, we could tweet emojis of coconuts and palm trees. Have you seen this going around? They're tweeting emojis of coconuts and palm trees. They're like, you're inside. It's an inside joke, right? It's an inside joke. The joke is apparently that Kamala Harris has said on one or more occasions that, what, did you just fall out of a coconut tree? Is the question. She's like, oh, Kamala, did you just fall out of a coconut tree? She says, so they're like, oh, that's our thing. We'll just use that. It's nonsensical, but we'll use it. And we'll make it like it's like an inside joke, not just like a really embarrassing, cringy statement. Here's the audio. This is Kamala Harris and her coconut tree riff recently.
But it's also about what is the culture of the environment? How are we approaching this issue in a way that we also understand we cannot support and help our young people if we also don't also look at the context in which those young people live and are being raised, which means necessarily, because our edict and our mission is not to come out and say, well, we could do this better. Part of the extension of the work you will do is, yes, focused on our young leaders and our young people, but understanding we also then have to be clear about the needs of their parents and their grandparents and their teachers and their communities.
Notice, by the way, you may not be able to tell. Actually, you can tell reflexively. She's not on teleprompter, which is why this is completely incoherent.
Because none of us just live in a silo. Everything is in context. My mother she would give us a hard time sometimes, and she would say to us, I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
Did you hear like the 3 charity laughs she got for that line? You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? She asked. So now they're memeing it. Now they think this is, man, that was amazing. That's exactly like when Trump got shot in the ear and he stood up and he said, fight, 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 and energy just exploded across the country. You could power a very tiny light bulb on the energy that Kamala Harris just generated. Very, very dim, very faint light bulb. You could power up on the energy she generated from that remark. So they want to reinvent her. They're giving her this personality. Hillary Clinton had more personality than this chick. Hillary Clinton. Remember Pokemon Go to the polls? Kamala Harris is I guess she's a blank slate. She's whatever you need her to be. She's an Etch-a-Sketch candidate. Just shake her up. Try again. And that is, in fact, what's happening right now. They are memory holing everything about her existence. From the ridiculous debate about whether or not she was actually the border. She was never the border czar. The border, what? The border czar? Yeah, of course she was the border czar. She was Joe Biden's point person for the American southern border. How do we stop the inflow? And of course, she was a spectacular failure. Not least of all because the Biden administration was never actually serious about securing the border. They kicked it open. They 94 executive orders immediately designed to allow foreign nationals to pour in, not only undetected, but in many cases assisted by the Biden administration. So she wasn't going to solve the border problem. They were just going to give us the appearance of action, and they stuck Kamala with it. They said, here, you do this. And now they're telling us she's not actually the border czar. She never was. She was never in charge of any of this, which is really, it is brazen, and it's another sign of why you don't distrust the media enough. And I know you distrust the media. But this idea that, like, well, where did all this distrust come from? How come nobody trusts us? Why don't people trust our institutions? Because they lie so freaking casually, brazenly, and obviously. You remember back in 2009, Van Jones, who's now a CNN host, a CNN panelist. Remember back in 2009, he worked for Obama. He worked in the Obama White House, and this became a big controversy because of his connection to communists. But the job, remember what the job was that Van Jones had? 2009. He was the green jobs czar for the Obama White House. Now, was green jobs czar actually his title? Was that the real title that they gave him? Well, no. I looked it up today. I had no idea what his title was. I was like, what was his title back when he worked for Obama in that White House? His actual title was Special Advisor for Green Jobs, Enterprise, and Innovation at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. So in other words, Van Jones was never the green jobs czar. There's the fact check. I just did it for you. Van Jones was never the green jobs czar. Never mind the fact that if you go read the New York Times today from 2009, if you go read Politico today from 2009, if you go read the Daily Caller from 2000, well, actually it didn't exist in 2009. If you go read Breitbart in 2009, you'll see green jobs czar, green jobs czar, green jobs czar. Because everybody understood that that's shorthand for a person who has immense power over a particular situation, who's been assigned, delegated responsibility for that issue. Was Kamala Harris delegated responsibility for any aspect of the border whatsoever? Yes, she was. In fact, the media was pretty open about it when it happened. They said she's in charge of the border. The Washington Free Beacon put this together today.
President Biden put his vice president, Kamala Harris, in charge of one of his administration's growing challenges. She is now the point person on immigration.
Vice President Harris is now the Biden administration's point person
to oversee his administration's efforts to stem the flow of migrants.
Kamala Harris, the point person on immigration.
The point person in the effort to stop the flow of migrants.
Kamala Harris will lead the response to the border challenge.
Kamala Harris
That was Joy Reid of all people. I love that.
the White House efforts to tackle migration challenges at the U.S.-Mexico border.
To take the lead on overseeing all of these efforts at the border.
Putting his vice president, Kamala Harris, in charge of this.
Her first big portfolio item.
To oversee solutions.
And now, what are they saying now?
She was put in charge of the border.
Nope. She was in charge of reaching out to the South and Central American countries to stem the immigration.
She wasn't the border czar.
She was not actually the border czar.
She is not the border czar.
She was never border czar.
She was not the border czar.
Let's be very clear. There was no border czar.
Let's be very clear. That's a Karine Jean-Pierre version of being clear, which is, I'm going to lie to you now. It's 350. Make that 321. Here he is.
He said she was Joe Biden's border czar. She wasn't. She was never put in charge of the border. She was given a much more limited assignment to lead a so-called root causes diplomatic effort trying to address the reasons in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras that people choose to migrate. Now, many Republicans scoff at this kind of fact check. They're like, there were a bunch of articles back in 2021 that called her border czar. Frankly, those articles were wrong. And if you look at CNN's own coverage, not to toot our own horn,
the news was wrong.
But you'll see that the White House and Harris's office consistently, as early as early 21, pushed back on that framing.
Not to toot our own horn, but we carried the White House's water back then. What a, just the shamelessness is admirable. Oh, man. Jim is in Fairfax calling in now on line one. Jim, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Jim. Fire away.
I just want to let you know that I think the current vice president's nom de plume should be something similar to a recent film where a moron was blundered into greatness. Mm-hmm. She should be called Kamala Gump.
Forrest Gump. You said a recent film. I think, when was Forrest Gump released? I think Forrest Gump was at like 1996. I think you may be dating yourself here, Jim. That was the sound as the crowd chanted to burn that bleep as they lit an American flag on fire, ripping American flags down off of poles out in front of beautiful Union Station, raising Palestinian flags in their wake, putting graffiti all over the monuments there in front of the building, including a replica of the Liberty Bell saying Hamas is coming, hammer and sickle graffiti as well, and just endless chaos there. Also assaulting police officers, grabbing them by the back of their body armor and dragging them across the ground. 23 people, they say, were arrested yesterday, but thousands were involved in the rioting. Here to discuss, Congressman Lee Zeldin, former congressman and a former candidate for governor in New York. Sir, good to have you with us.
It's good to be with you, Vince.
It's unfortunately not surprising, but awful to see this happen once again in our nation's capital, sir.
Yeah, where's the police? Why is it not being stopped? And there's a line with free speech that when it's clearly crossed and laws are being broken, then law enforcement should be getting involved. And there's some people saying, well, it's protected free speech to burn a flag. The flag was taken down off of a flagpole in front of Union Station. That's not their flag to burn. Why is nobody talking about that?
Right.
What about the property that's there that they are spray painting, that they are vandalizing with their message, that they're painting over? What about those crimes? And why not just crack down on it on the spot? Instead, these pro-Hamas protesters are given all of this space to be able to make their comments, which if it was just comments, much of what they say would be protected free speech. But when the line's crossed, whether we're talking about in front of Union Station or nation's capital, or it's happening on a college campus where, as part of the speech, you also have Jewish students unable to get to a library because they're Jewish when studying for the finals, or unable to get from dorm to classroom without being physically confronted. When the lines get crossed, enforce the law.
For sure. And the media, to the extent that they've paid attention to any of this or given it any airtime, they've tried to downplay the relationship to Hamas that these people have in terms of their sympathies, but they're spray painting it directly on America's monuments. Right there in Union, right there in front of Union Station, they're writing, Hamas is coming. They're not being subtle about this, Congressman.
You start flipping the narrative. It's conservatives out there instead. And they're out there with anti-Democratic Party, anti-Joe Biden, anti-Kamala Harris rhetoric. Then all of a sudden, there's not just a call for law enforcement to get involved and for prosecutors to prosecute. Every single Republican anywhere in America, whether you belong to a local town board or you're running for president of the United States, everyone not only needs to immediately issue their statement condemning it, but their allegations made as if they're the ones doing the graffiti themselves. And too often we've seen this double standard and this hypocrisy at play where it's filtered down to the point where average everyday Americans now see through it. And we can't be operating with that double standard. And in this particular case, you have Jewish students and Jewish Americans and Jewish professors and more. And in the case of folks with the pro-Hamas Death to America, burning American flags and yelling Allahu Akbar, I mean, you're talking about a national security concern when that free speech line gets crossed.
Definitely. Can you talk a little bit about the what's going on with the Democrats? There's a meaningful part of their party that is pretty openly anti-Semitic, and it's even trickling out into affecting whether or not Kamala Harris chooses a Jewish running mate, if you can believe that. Take a listen to this. This is on CNN this week. John King saying that Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro being Jewish may be a risk for that party.
Pennsylvania's Governor Josh Shapiro is being discussed as one of Harris's potential running mates. He also endorsed her tonight. In your view, what are the pros and cons for putting him on the ticket?
Well, he's certainly under consideration. I know that from key Harris allies. He's a first-term governor. He's Jewish. There could be some risks in putting him on the ticket, but certainly some of our voters here in Pennsylvania said, hey, we like Governor Shapiro. Give him a look.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Newsweek with a headline today, Josh Shapiro could help Kamala Harris win Jewish voters, but is a big risk. What's going on here?
Well, and they're spitting truth. This isn't some type of one-off observation somebody's making, and there's a counter argument to be made. A lot of how the Biden administration has and Kamala Harris now are approaching what's going on between Israel and Gaza and what's happening here with the protest is geared towards domestic politics and the election coming up, the impacts on Michigan, and the consequences of what was a massive number of non-committed voters during the Michigan Democratic primary. I've campaigned multiple times in and around Detroit for President Trump over the last few months. And while Rashida Tlaib and a lot of people in Dearborn who agree with her are one way with their anti-Semitism and as it relates to the Israel-Hamas war, refusing to condemn Hamas and pursuing a one-state solution where the Jewish state of Israel isn't even the Jewish state of Israel anymore. On the counterweight is that in the Detroit suburbs, you have a whole bunch of longtime Democrat voters, including a lot of Jewish Democrats, who have said enough is enough. And that has been their breaking point where for the first time they're saying, I was a Clinton-Biden voter who is now going to vote for President Trump, or they're at least saying that they're considering it, or they're just not as enthusiastic about their support for Biden and Harris. And Harris is actually further to the left than Biden was. So that's a real issue for them. It shouldn't be. What they should do is just make their calls as to what they say and what their positions are based off of what is right and wrong, what they know on a moral compass, as opposed to what a pollster is telling them, hey, we have an issue in Michigan.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And I was just saying earlier, and now they've really backed themselves into a corner because they're sort of damned if they do, damned if they don't. Kamala Harris waited 24 hours to condemn the anti-Semitism, anti-American, burning the American flag, destruction out in front of Union Station. She did release a statement today, which also did condemn Hamas. But this strikes me as, well, this is going to create new problems for her among her base, which is unfortunately sympathetic to that terrorist organization.
Well, the way that she and Biden are playing their politics on this is that when they do feel compelled to say something that sends a message to the Jewish community, or at least to the non-Hamas sympathizer community, they do stuff simultaneously that ends up dog whistling, gaslighting that pro-Hamas community that is out there. So what I was predicting, as soon as Kamala Harris put her statement out, simultaneously you have Bibi Netanyahu walking into the White House to sit down with Joe Biden, is that the comms that would be coming out of the White House would be very much focused on pushing Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire, as if that is what is preventing there to be an end to the conflict. That all Netanyahu has to do is say, okay, I'm good, right, and then there's peace and all the hostages are released. So Kamala Harris is about to sit down with Bibi, and I would say what is most likely to leak out of there is about how Kamala Harris behind the scenes is being strong in pushing Bibi Netanyahu to try to counterbalance her statement about what happened outside of Union Station.
Do you expect any word on efforts to retrieve American hostages from Gaza?
If she can avoid it, I don't believe so. We'll see. I mean, there's a possibility that the calculation is that they have to make a reference to it, but I would say that with what we're watching, and it's really been the MO now for many months, is that whenever you see them say anything that is right with regards to what we're talking about here on the line right now, they find a way in the same news cycle to also push out messaging that is wink, wink to their base of the Rashida Tlaibs of the world.
It's so crazy. Also, President Trump set to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu tomorrow down in Mar-a-Lago. Do you think how important are these two meetings, both his meeting with the Biden White House and then with President Trump?
Well, I think it's very important. I mean, there's multiple instruments of national power, and if you want to end the conflict favorably between Israel and Gaza, it's not all just the military instrument of national power. In the United States military, it's the principle of dime, diplomacy, information, military economics. Well, there's a lot to the Israel-Hamas conflict than just the military action. And for Bibi to be in the United States, getting to speak before a joint session of Congress, being in the White House, and being able to sit down with the next president, Donald Trump, all allow him to get his message out, to set the record straight between fact and fiction, and to be strong on the international stage, and to help build more support amongst the world's leaders.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. I'm also looking forward to, do you think the possibility of Trump's election in November, should that occur, will that change any of the dynamics on the ground there in Israel, in Gaza?
For sure. As we saw during 4 years of Donald Trump in the White House, no new conflicts were started. There was no Israel-Hamas conflict. There was no Ukraine, Russia invasion in Ukraine. It happened during Obama, and then it happened again under Biden. Instead, the exact opposite was happening, and I would imagine President Trump would look to pick up right where he left off.
Yeah, and try and figure out a way to solve all of this really quickly. It'd be good if he did. Before we let you go, we're talking to Lee Zeldin, former congressman, former gubernatorial candidate in New York. Can I get your reaction to the assassination attempt on President Trump? You've of course been no stranger to politics and no stranger to the rough and tumble world of it too. I mean, you had quite famously somebody attacked you on a campaign stage. What were you thinking when you saw President Trump shot just a few weekends ago now?
First, it was whether or not he was safe. Then it was about my thought was about the safety of everyone else who was there. That was instantly coming to mind. Then I was wondering, well, who or how many are responsible? And then as you learn the facts of President Trump's safety with regards to the victims, and then there was a shooter, and the shooter was stopped, and you start learning more about the warnings and the perimeter and more, it leads to so many questions. And the questions are obvious regardless of whether you're a member of Congress or you're just sitting down in any barber's chair anywhere in this country. I would like to see more curiosity coming out of this White House. I would like to see leadership there, either firing or calling for resignation as opposed to putting a finger up in the air. Somebody should ask Kamala Harris, what questions do you have? Because right now the American public have a lot of unanswered questions, and if they think only the Secret Service director resigning is the end of this, then they have another thing coming, because a lot of questions are still getting asked, and Americans are not going to stop demanding answers. You still have Americans demanding answers from the Kennedy assassination, but we don't want to have to wait 40 years. We don't want to have to wait 4 months.
But their lack of curiosity in the White House suggests to me they don't think that they're unsafe. They think they're well protected by the Secret Service.
The fact is that they were denying Bobby Kennedy Jr. Resources. Clearly, President Trump's campaign was requesting resources that were getting denied. It is important that we are protecting our presidential candidates and that these scores, are settled at the ballot box.
Amen. All right, Lee Zeldin, good to talk to you, sir. Great to have you on the program today. Hey there.
I just listened to Zeldin.
Yes.
And he was in the military, I know. And I'd like to see somebody like him or somebody else lean in on the Justice Department. These people can be identified. They, burnt government property, U.S. flag. And furthermore, like Swalwell, for instance, saying that, they were doing their First Amendment thing. Why don't these reporters say, you mean to tell me burning government property is First Amendment rights? I don't think so. You know what I'm saying?
Your speech is your First Amendment right. Burning government property, destroying government property isn't, as you point out, a free speech right. And Lee Zeldin made the same point. You're breaking the law. You're destroying that federal property. And then, so these people should be prosecuted. Not only should they be prosecuted, they should be investigated for their connection to the Iranian government. It is crystal clear, and even the Biden administration has admitted, Dennis, that the Iranians have been funding these riots here in the United States. Why wasn't yesterday's considered a part of that?
Right. What are they doing? What is the government doing? And also, did you see the one thing where the guy in a well-dressed suit tried to stop the burning, and one of these imbeciles basically attacked him. Now, that's an assault, too. I mean,
Yes.
They identified all these people on January 6th. I mean, let's get some action here, and don't let the government off the hook on this.
These guys, of course, are producing way more disorder than anything associated with January 6th. And you're totally right. Like a real Justice Department would be thoroughly investigating all of this rather than giving us like a couple of measly arrests. We got a couple yesterday. According to the Washington Post, they say 23 were arrested by a number of agencies, the D.C. Police, Capitol Police, U.S. Park Police. But if you ask any local police officer here in Washington, D.C., hey, what happens when you arrest people? It's a crapshoot. It's a total crapshoot because the prosecutors may not actually take it anywhere. And the judges may not actually take it anywhere. And disproportionately, if the people who are arrested are serving some sort of left-wing cause, chances are they're just going to be out and free in no time.